She found my old diary and left without a word. It is strange how something you wrote years ago, something you barely remember, can destroy everything you've built in the present. A few pages of ink, scribbled by a boy who didn't know who he was, can bring down a man who thought he finally did. No one expects their past to show up like that. Not in the hands of someone they love. Not in the kind of silence that hurts more than words ever could. That's exactly what happened to Mark. Mark had always believed that his life had finally aligned. At 33, he had everything he thought a man needed to call himself happy. A steady career in design, a small but beautiful apartment in San Diego, and Claire someone who made life feel lighter, brighter, more meaningful. They had been together for almost 2 years. The kind of relationship people describe as effortless, though anyone who's ever truly loved knows nothing about love is ever effortless. They had their differences. He was cautious, sometimes distant. She was open, warm, endlessly curious, but they balanced each other in a quiet, almost poetic way. Mark admired how Claire saw the world. She noticed stories in people. Her ability to connect to care was something Mark envied. He often thought that maybe through her, he was learning to live a little more. What he didn't know was that, one quiet Sunday morning, while trying to declutter the apartment, Claire would stumble upon something Mark had forgotten even existed. A small black notebook, torn at the edges, hidden deep in a box of old-school papers. It was his diary from when he was 17. Back then, Mark was not the man Claire knew. He was a shadow of himself, awkward, bitter, and uncertain. He had grown up believing he was unworthy of love, that he was always the one who stayed invisible while others were chosen. The diary had been his escape, his only place to speak freely. He had written things out of anger, insecurity, and shame, things he had outgrown but never faced. Inside those pages were confessions, words laced with envy, judgment, and fear. He had written about a girl he once cared for, someone who never noticed him. He wrote about how he resented pretty people, how he believed girls went for rich guys, confident ones, the ones who knew what to say, while he only ever stumbled. He wrote about how love felt like a game rigged before it began. Some entries were dark, others were vulnerable, but all of it was honest. It was the unfiltered mind of a boy trying to understand why he felt so small in a world that demanded perfection. And though Mark no longer carried those beliefs, the words still existed, black ink on white paper, frozen in time. When Claire found the diary, she didn't mean to read it. But curiosity is a strange thing, especially when you think you know someone completely. She told herself she would only take a peek, just a few lines. But one paragraph turned into a page, and one page turned into hours. What she read didn't sound like the man she knew, the man who held her when she was anxious, who listened, who treated her with quiet respect. The words startled her. They felt cruel, even hateful at times. Sentences like daggers, written without remorse, from a younger version of the man she loved. She closed the diary slowly, holding it like it was something toxic, something that could hurt her if she read even one more word. That night, she said nothing. She cooked dinner like usual, smiled faintly when he kissed her cheek, and turned off the lights earlier than usual. But her silence was loud. Mark noticed. He could feel it, the shift. The small distance between bodies that didn't exist yesterday. The missing laughter. The heaviness of something unspoken. He asked her if she was okay. She said she was fine. But she didn't meet his eyes. Days passed. The warmth between them thinned like fog under the morning sun. Claire avoided touch. She barely spoke. Then, one Thursday evening, he came home to find her gone. Her clothes, her books, her toothbrush, all gone. Only the diary was left, placed neatly on the kitchen counter. No note, no message. Not even a goodbye, just silence again. A silence that echoed with accusation. Mark sat down on the floor, staring at that small black book. He hadn't seen it in years. It looked harmless. But the moment he opened it, he realized what she must have read. He felt a tide of shame rise inside him. He remembered writing those words after a breakup he never really had, the kind that existed only in his head, the result of unreturned affection and swollen pride. He had written about how people only dated for beauty and money, how love was a cruel trick, how he wished sometimes that someone would finally hurt as much as he did. Reading it now, he could see the pain between the lines. But from her eyes, how could it not look ugly? She must have thought those words still lived inside him, that the boy who wrote them had grown into a man who still thought that way. And in that instant, Mark understood something awful. Sometimes people leave not because of who you are, but because of who you used to be. The next few weeks were slow, gray, and heavy. Mark tried calling her, texting her, even reaching out through mutual friends. Nothing. Claire wasn't angry. She wasn't yelling. She was simply gone. The absence was harder than hate. It was like being erased from someone's story. In the quiet of his apartment, Mark began reading more of his old diary, slowly, page by page, trying to remember the boy he used to be. He found loneliness echoing in every word, desperation in every sentence. He realized that the boy who wrote those words wasn't cruel. He was confused. He was begging to be seen, to matter. He saw himself in those pages the way you see a stranger in an old photo, someone familiar, but distant. It was strange. The more he read, the more compassion he felt for both his younger self and for Claire, because in truth, she had every reason to leave. He had never shared that part of himself with her, never said, "I used to be this person." He had hidden that chapter, thinking if he buried it deep enough, it would vanish. But the past doesn't vanish, it waits. And when it reappears, it demands honesty. A few months later, he saw Claire by chance at a small cafe near the waterfront. She looked peaceful, but there was distance in her eyes. They didn't speak at first, just an awkward smile. Then she said quietly, "I didn't know what to do when I read it." He nodded. There was nothing to defend. She continued, "It just didn't sound like you, but I couldn't unsee it either." Mark told her that it was written by a version of himself that hated the world because he felt invisible in it. He confessed he was embarrassed, not because she found it, but because some of those feelings still lived inside him in ways he didn't want to admit. She listened, silent, gentle. Then she said something that stayed with him. "It's not who you were that scared me. It was that you never told me about him." And then she left again. Only this time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like understanding. That night, Mark sat by the window and watched the city lights blur. He realized how fragile trust really is. How people fall in love not just with your present, but with a story they believe about your past. And when that story changes, everything else does too. Mark thought about how often people hide their old bruises, their embarrassing mistakes, their shame. They want to show only the polished version, the healed one. But maybe that's where the problem begins. Because love, real love, doesn't come from hiding what's broken. It comes from revealing it. He had spent his whole adult life trying to be perfect, stable, desirable. But authenticity is what Claire wanted, not perfection. And now, she was gone, leaving behind not regret, but reflection. Time passed. Seasons changed. Mark started volunteering at a local youth arts center, teaching kids how to draw, how to express their emotions on paper instead of hiding them in words they might later regret. Many of those kids reminded him of himself, uncertain, self-conscious, searching. He found peace there, purpose even. Sometimes he still thought about Claire, the warmth in her laugh, the way she once looked at him as if she could see who he truly was. But now, he saw her leaving as an act of grace. because it forced him to face his own story, to forgive that teenage boy for being lost. And in that forgiveness, Mark found something he hadn't felt in years' freedom. Looking back, it's ironic. The diary that destroyed his relationship also became the thing that saved his relationship with himself. It made him confront the truth that growth isn't about burying who you were, but integrating it into who you've become. That the person we were awkward, angry, jealous still lives inside us, quietly shaping our fears. And maybe the goal isn't to kill that person, but to understand him, to guide him gently toward the light. Because every human, no matter how polished they seem, carries pages they'd rather no one ever read. Some hide them forever. Others, like Mark, are forced to face them. And when they do, they learn something profound. That healing doesn't come from being forgiven by others. It comes from forgiving yourself. But there's a shadow that lingers. Sometimes, late at night, Mark wonders if Claire had never found that diary. Would they still be together? Would life have been simpler without that truth? The answer never feels clear, because honesty, even when it hurts, often dismantles illusions we didn't know we were living in. And sometimes, the truth ends a story, not because it destroys love, but because it demands a deeper version of it, one that both people aren't ready for yet. Maybe love has less to do with holding on, and more to do with letting each other see what's real, even if it's uncomfortable. And in that exposure, in that painful transparency, lies the strange beauty of being human. So, when Mark looks back at the moment Claire left without a word, he no longer sees it as betrayal. He sees it as a mirror, a reminder that silence can speak louder than confrontation. That sometimes, losing someone teaches you more about love than keeping them ever could. Because through her absence, he found an unexpected kind of presence, his own. Years later, Mark still keeps the diary. Not hidden, not buried. It now sits on a bookshelf beside his adult journals. Sometimes when he feels uncertain, he flips through it and smiles not out of pride, but of peace. He has forgiven that boy. He has learned from him. And every page is proof that transformation is real, that people can grow from bitter to kind, from broken to whole, from blind to awake. In the end, the story of Mark and Claire isn't one of tragedy. It's one of awakening. A reminder that the past doesn't just shape us, it tests us. It reveals what happens when our hidden truths meet the people we love most. And maybe what we consider endings are simply beginnings in disguise. This story reminds us that sometimes what we hide to protect love can end up destroying it, but through honesty and reflection, we find who we truly are. But I want to hear from you. Do you believe our past mistakes should still determine how others see us today? Or can love truly begin only when we're brave enough to share all of who we've been?